Hey, this is Passy from Passy's World of ICT with another Visual Basic programming tutorial. And today we're going to look at just a simple program that's going to add together two numbers which the user inputs on a screen form. But we're going to look at converting text box data off the screen form into numeric format that the program needs to use to add up the two numbers. So let's get started. Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to look at how text box data on a form is converted to numerical format so that it can be mathematically processed by the program. So the program we've got is going to be able to do decimal numbers. So it can do something like 10.5 here, adding on 2, which will make 12.5. And that happens, they enter those two numbers, and you click the Add Numbers button and it gives that answer there. We're also going to have something later on, some error handling, so that if they type in something like TWO for the number 2, that's not numeric. So we'll have an error box pop up and tell them that and make sure they re-enter that number. And that will also avoid having the program crash from non-numeric data. Okay, so we're going to intercept that bad data from the text box and alert the user to input data entry errors. All right, so the first thing we need to do is some application design. And so we usually start by designing our solution. We need to design the screen, which is called the GUI, the GUI, the graphical user interface for the program, as well as the pseudocode for the program processing that's going to happen behind this screen. Okay, so we have the form design. Now we can do that using the Visual Basic IDE, the Integrated Development Environment. So we can just do that in Visual Basic. And for the pseudocode, we need to just type that out like in a word processor or something like that. So we've got our screen design set up of how the screen's going to look exactly how we want it. And for the pseudocode there, we've got the processing. Basically, we're going to just ask them for the numbers, get each of the numbers, add the numbers up, and output an answer to them. So fairly simple program, fairly simple pseudocode. What could possibly go wrong? Well, we'll see about that. All right, so we need to actually get into a detailed design specification for the form screen so that someone can actually build this in Visual Basic. So we've got our sort of form screen set up there. Now, we've just done it by using the Visual Basic IDE. Strictly speaking, and if you're doing VC software development here in Melbourne, Australia, they want you to draw these up. I think you can still draw them neatly by hand or use something like Microsoft Visio, I think it's called, or a drawing package, or you could even use a Word document to actually draw these up. And we need to give specific details. We need to identify the font types, the sizes, the object names, and also any special property settings that's going to be required in Visual Basic. So first up here, you'll notice on the top of the form, it says addition program. So how do you get that to happen? Well, while you clicked on the form, you go and change its text property to say addition program. And we also set for the form that the back color is that gold color. Now, the next thing we have is a label up the top there. Now that label's not going to be referenced in the program, so we can just leave its name as label 1, the name that Visual Basic gives to it. And that's sans serif font, the default font, and the size is 16 point, which needs to be set in the properties. We'll see all this when we set the form up. Then we've got our first text number here in that text box. Something's gone missing there in one of the slide-ins. We'll catch up with that later. But because we were supposed to have these three labels here as well. This one's label 1, label 2, label 3. They're all font size 14. But anyway, the text box for the first number here, that needs to be set up that it's got the normal default sans serif font size 14. And then our answer box here is actually set up that it looks just like a text box, but it isn't. It's actually a label so that people can't type into it. And we get it to look like a text box by changing its border style to fixed single to get a line around it and its back color to white. We've also got a button there, the add button, the add the numbers button. That's going to be called btn add. Notice here we're using Hungarian notation to name everything. And if you don't know what that is, you need to go back and watch our video all about data types and naming conventions. And back up here, we've got the labels, 2, 3, 4 that we were talking about earlier. They're all font size 14. We've got the second number text box here, which is also size 14 font. And last of all, we've got btn clear, which is also a size 14 font that goes into that. All right, so sorry those sliders all went in the wrong order. I'm not sure what happened. I should have tested this a bit better before I did it. The importance of testing things before you release them to production. Anyway, let's continue. So that is the form, and that's how we're going to be able to set it up. And then after that, we're going to need some coding. But let's just, for now, jump across to Visual Studio and let's get that set up. All right, so here we are in Visual Studio 2017, the Community Edition. We had a video about how to install that, and you can go back and look at that to get this for free to use. So we go File, and we go that we want a new project. Okay, the type of project we want is, see here on the side, it's Visual Basic. We want a Windows desktop one, and we want a Windows Forms. Okay, let me just check this. Windows Desktop. Yep, so Windows Desktop is what we want. And the second one down, Windows Forms app, that's the type of one we want. So we click onto that one as well. Now, we don't want to call it Windows App 1 down the bottom here in the name. So this is going to just be add 2 numbers. It'll be a good name for this one. And then we say OK on the OK box at the bottom right-hand corner here. Okay, that'll take a little while just to set up the folders and the files, but there we are, and there's our form, which we can just resize a little bit, and we're ready to go with the form. Now, we had the form design previously on our PowerPoint. Let's just go back and look at that. So yeah, we need to set up all these things on the form, and ideally you'd be looking back and referencing this design you did while you're doing the coding. All right, so the first thing we need is that label up the top for the heading. So here in the toolbox, now if your toolbox wasn't showing, you'd need to go to, up the top here, Window, and no, not that one. You'd need to actually go to View and go to View and Toolbox, this one here, View Toolbox. So that'll open it up, and you can pin it in place there with this drawing pin. So it stays there. Anyway, we just want all Windows Forms, everything for forms, and it's all in alphabetical order. So if we go down here, we somewhere should find in the L's label. So you get onto label and you drag that out onto your form. So this label here, we're just leaving its name and the properties on the right-hand corner here is label 1. We need to go down and set its text up to, this is going to be just add 2 numbers. Okay, and then we need to go change the font. So this is all in alphabetical order as well. So where font is, if you click on that, and then there's a triple dots, the ellipsis it's called, or the expression builder. So click on that triple dots, and that opens up something which is a little bit more friendly and familiar, and we can set that to size 14. We're just leaving it Microsoft Sans Serif, the standard one, and that'll get that to 14. And actually, thinking back to the design, that's the main heading, so that's 16, that's a little bit bigger. Okay, now once we've made one of these, the easiest way is to just click on the form and go Control-C and Control-V to paste another one. So this is going to be for entering the first number. In its properties, we're just going to change the font size with that triple dots. This one goes down to 14, all the rest are going to be 14. So let's just Control-C, Control-V that, and Control-V it again. So we've got 3 of those here, and these don't need special names, so we'll just put them on the form. Now the first one's just going to ask in the text property down the bottom here, that's going to be where we ask them to enter the first number, and the next one here is going to ask them to enter the second number. So we can just go down to the text property on that one while we're clicked on it. And the third one is going to be our answer. So we'll just say sum of numbers. Okay, so it's going to be the answer one. Now with these, we'll just line them up a little bit better. So let's put that first one into the middle. Let's go back and click on our form because we forgot there that the back color, down at back color, we need to click on that and go to web and find our way down to where gold is and pick gold for the color. Okay, so that's all looking good. Now these will look better if we kind of line them up here, and you can see Visual Basics helping us out here, putting little lines as we move them. So we want those all kind of right aligned next to each other like that. And now we can put in our text boxes. Okay, so if we go down into the T's here, we should have a text box, this one. So we drag that out onto the form. And the font size on this needed to be 14 so that it can match up okay. So click on the triple dots there, get it onto 14, and that's ready to go. Now this one also needed a special name. This one is using Hungarian TXT because it's a text box, and I think we had one ST number for its name. So that's TXT first number. So that's all good. Now, if we Control C, Control V on that, we can make another one down here for the second number. So that one's going to be called, in its properties, just where the name is, that's going to be called TXT second number. So we've got that all sorted. And this third one looks like a text box. Remember, it isn't, it's a label. So we can Control C, Control V, the sum of numbers. And down in its text property, let's just call that sum at the moment. And then we want to need to make a few changes. So this one needs a special name. This is the LBL. And I need to go back and look at its name actually. This one had a special name, it's called LBL answer. Okay, so this one, for its name up the top here, for its property on that text box is LBL answer. And then we want to make it the exact same size as the text box. Okay, but first, let's just change its back color here. So the back color is going to be web colors right up the top, white. So that's looking good. And then the border style, the next property directly underneath back color, that's going to be a fixed single. So you can see right now it looks like a text box, but we want to be able to resize it to make it the same size as these other ones here. So if we go back and click on one of those text boxes, you can go down and look at its size property. So it's 100,34. Okay, now this one here, if we go down and look at the size property, we'll change it so it's 100,34, and that won't let us do it. We get an error message, property value is not valid. That's because at the moment auto size is turned on, so Visual Basic wants to make it the same size as those three letters that we've got for sum. So we need to go and find the auto size property and see how it's true. We need to set that to false, and then we are allowed to resize that text box. So now that auto size is false, we can go back down to size and we'll set that to our 100,34. So that's the exact same size as the text box. All right, now that we've got it all sized up, let's go down to its text property, which says sum at the moment, and just blank all that out and press enter. All right, so that was a little bit of work for that one, but that is a label that looks like a text box. Now, why did we go to all that trouble when we could have just put a text box there? Well, the thing about the label is people won't be able to type in that and change it, all right? So it's not a data entry sort of item on the form. That's just going to display an answer. So if they get all mixed up and put in their first number, second number, try and put in the sum of numbers themselves, they'll find they can't type anything in there because it's a label. Okay, now we're nearly done with this form. We just need a button. So up the top here, button, if we drag out one button, this first button for its text, that needs to say, that's going to be add the numbers. And we need the font size, where font is, to change that to be 14, so it matches up nicely with everything else. And then it's not fitting because it's too big for the writing, so you just stretch that, stretch it out so it fits better. So we're kind of going to put that down there. And it needs a special name. So up the top where the name is, it's called button 1 at the moment. That was going to be called btn add. Okay, now we can just Control C that, Control V it, and then the font size will all be good and the same size and stuff. And this one's going to be called btn clear. So we'll change its name, btn clear, in the property. And down the bottom, it needs to not say add numbers, it needs to say clear. And then we'll just resize it to make it a little bit smaller like that. So I think basically that was kind of the design we had back in the PowerPoint. Maybe we'll just bring those sides in a little bit. But yeah, that's looking all right. Now we can click the green start arrow up the top here. So if we do that, let's just check if it sort of looks like it should when it runs. It takes a little while there to run it because it's building all the folders for the project. But that's looking good, that's nice. Except up the top here it says form 1 and we wanted it to say addition program. So there's one little thing we need to fix up there. So if we click back on the form, and while we're clicked on the gold area here to select the whole form, whoops, I double clicked there, go to its property, and where it's got its text property, it's form 1 at the moment. We need to change the text property to addition program. Make sure you only change the text property. Don't change the name. If you accidentally change the name up the top from being form 1 to addition program, you can run into trouble. So don't change the name. We're just changing the text down there, and then up the top it'll say addition program in the top left-hand corner of the form. So at last that form's all ready to go. So let's do a save. So we'll just go File and Save All. Okay, and with that, it's called Add Two Numbers. Now we browse to a folder to put it in. So we've just got a folder here. Let's go into our programming, Add Two Numbers, and we'll just put it in that folder. So we'll select that folder and say Save. And that takes a little while. Don't click the Save button more than once. It's just building all the folders behind the scenes for the project. So that is all of the form built, and now we're ready to do the programming. So we double click on the Add Numbers button because all the action is going to happen when they click that button. So in this IDE environment here, if we double click on that, that will take us into the code writer, and see it's already done this private sub for when the button is clicked, and it's got an end sub. Okay, so don't try and write these yourself. They always go wrong. Just use what Visual Basic gives you when you double click the add numbers on the form. Okay, so that's all there ready to go. Now the code we need is, we're just going to save some time here, and you can save time as well because you can get this Word document that has the code in it. And the first thing we need to do is just dimension the variables, and we're going to set them up as double. So rather than using integer for whole numbers, because we want to do decimals as well, we're just going to call them double type, and that means you can do decimals or whole numbers. They are squiggled in green at the moment. That's just this kind of warning message from Visual Basic that, hey, you've got these variables dimensioned, but you're not going to be using them yet because they're not using the code. And wouldn't you know it, of course, the phone rings. Okay, so I've dimensioned those variables because in the program we're going to use the variables to do the arithmetic, not the actual form items. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to actually get the values out of the text box onto the form. Now the first way we're going to do it is with the VAL function. So let's just paste that in. What this is doing is we've got that text box, txt first number dot text on the form. Let's go back to the form here by clicking the tab up the top. This one here is called txt first number in its property. Okay, so what we've got is the number will be put into that text box, but we can't use it because it's in string kind of sentence writing format. It's not in number format. So we have to use this VAL brackets. And what that'll do is it'll get the value of a number that's in there, and that'll then set that up into the DBL first number variable that we've set up in our program. If we just run the program at this stage, we'll just check it's working. So if we put a 2 in, okay, it's all good. Now this will also be fine if you put in a blank, and it'll be okay as well if someone doesn't sort of understand and puts TWO for the number 2 in. So it just won't do anything there. So that's kind of something to note. Now for the next one, we need to get the number out of this second text box and convert that into a number that the program can use, right? So we're going to do it a different way. We're going to use the cast method, the cast function. All right, so we'll just take this code from here and just put it in there. So we're going to cast it as a double. So what we do is our DBL second number variable we defined previously, we're going to use CDBL brackets, okay? And what that does is it takes whatever's in the text box on the form and it's going to turn it into double notation and store it like that in the computer memory. And double is a number notation, which means the computer will be able to do mathematics on this. And let's put the mathematics in there as well. So we just want some mathematics to add up the numbers and something to display them out onto the screen. So let's just put those lines in. So now we've got our DBL first number set up and our DBL second number set up. From the text box items, they've been converted into numbers and moved in. We can just add them together. So DBL sum of numbers equals the first number plus the second number. And then that's inside the computer's memory. So we've got to get that out on the screen. So we just put that DBL sum of numbers into that label text box, label box that we've got there. So into the text property of that label, we're going to move this in, okay? So you can look at that and try it out and think about it yourself, but let's try and see how that works now. So if we put in the number, let's say 2, and we want to add on 3, which should make 5, when we click add numbers, it does do 5. And if we do a decimal like 2.1 plus 3, well then it should be 5.1. So that's all working really well. The clear button isn't working. Let's just put the code in for that quickly because that's very simple. So if we double click on the clear button on the form, the code you need is just this code here, and you can get this Word document from the YouTube video description. We've got a download link for that. So we just want to clear out all the values in both of those input text boxes that are on the form and in the label, all right? The thing is, just remember to put .text because it's a text property that you want to clear out, not anything else like its back color or other things like that. So let's just check if that works. So this should also work for negative numbers. So if we've got 0.5 and we put in -1 and add them, it does come out -0.5. So it works for negatives as well and for decimals, and we clear it and it's all fantastic. And it looks like, you know, yay, we finished our program. But let's just try something here. What if someone just didn't type anything in and clicked add numbers? Oh no, something's happened. Okay, and that's what we need to have a look into. So when we've got this here, what we need to do is stop the program now because it's crashed. And up the top, next to where the start button was, there's a red square button. That's kind of the emergency stop button. So we push that to stop the program. We'll just go back to our slides and see where we're up to on that. So we've put that code in, and that's all of the code that does the adding of the two numbers. And that was the clear button code, which just blanks everything out to be nothing and clears it. And if you do some program testing, as long as they put numbers in, that's great. But if they leave that second text box blank, there is a problem. Okay, now this error shown on this screen, this one came from running the actual generated version of the program. So let's have a look at that quickly. Where we've got our program here, add two numbers, if you just keep clicking in the top level folder all the way through into the bin binary, into the debug, this first one that's called an application, you can run that in standalone mode. So you could copy this to a USB and run it without having Visual Studio going. So look, if we leave the first number blank, there's a problem because, sorry, if we leave the first one blank, what happens is when you go to add the numbers, it's okay, and it just puts that to 0. So whatever we've put in here puts it to 0. Now remember, that first one was being done by a val clause, a VAL function. So that's all good, but if you leave this second one that's being done by the CDbl function, let's just clear that first. If we leave this second one blank, well, then we get that exception and the program crashes with this all broken red X symbol here telling us it's broken, so we need to quit the program. Okay, so what you're probably thinking is, well, why do we use that CDbl method? Why don't we just do everything using val instead, the val function, because the val function works great. And that would be one solution, but what we can do is we can actually fix the problem for the CDbl. So we can fix this by adding a try, catch, and try processing into the program. And we'll do that for you in a minute. But what it basically means is around where we had that DBL second number CDbl, a conversion, we put a try statement, then we catch the exception, and we can now put a message and we can end the try. And this will fix that program crashing problem. Now we'll show you that in Visual Studio. So let's just go into our Word document and have a look at version 2 where we have the try catch processing. So first number is getting done by val. Second one, we're going to change all the coding around for that. So on the second one where we're using the cast, let's just take that out and put this in. Okay, and we're just going to take this one out for now as well. So let's zoom in and have a look at what we've got here. So what we've done is we've got a try, and then this is indented, so it's going to try converting to double that text box that's got the second number in it, but it's going to catch the exception. Instead of crashing, it's going to sort of catch it and trap it and stop it, intercept it. So intercept that bad data before it can come off the form and go into the program and do damage and crash it. And then you just have an end try. And what this does is it makes it behave just like the val function. So remember on the first one when we leave it blank, it's just setting it to 0. And now we can leave the second one blank and there's no problem. So it's just setting that one to 0 by catching the exception and stopping the crash. And it'll just take 4 plus 0 should give us 4. Okay, and you can leave the first one blank that's using val and same sort of thing happens. All right, but I still haven't convinced you. Why don't we just use val? It's so simple. It's one line of code up here for val versus 4 lines of code down here. Well, the nice thing about this is you can give the user a specific message about what is wrong. So we can have a message box here, and we'll put that in. So when the exception occurs, we'll also put out a message. So we use messagebox.show, and we say, please enter a number for the message. And this input error, comma input error, that's going to go on the top of the message box. So we'll show you what happens here when we run it. You'll see that. So see how it's saying there on this input error, please enter a number. All right, so it won't crash. So if we leave that second one blank, it tells us to enter a number. So it's telling us specifically what's wrong and stopping things. It's not going ahead and doing the rest of the program. And this is called input validation, and we'll do a lot more on this in another lesson. But this is actually the preferred method because it pinpoints the error. So let's say you just heard a big crash down the far end of your house right now, and you're thinking, oh, what are those kids up to? What's happened? Because it came from their playroom where the big crashes usually come from. Well, you could just get onto the CCTV on your laptop here and play it back and see what happens. So you actually pinpoint accurately what happened to cause that big crash. And that's what we're kind of doing with this try, catch, end try. It's like we're kind of running CCTV and seeing exactly what happened. So in our final version of the program, which is in the Word doc, so we're just going to take out all of this code right here and delete it and go to the Word doc where we've got the final version. And what we've done there is we've got rid of the val completely, and instead we're just going to use the CDbl, convert them to doubles, but we're going to have the try, catch, end try. So it will find out when people have made mistakes, and we can put out a message telling them exactly what they've done wrong. So if we try and run this now, add the numbers. It tells us input error, please enter a numerical value for the first number. So we know the first number is the one that's wrong, and also the second number hasn't got a value in it. All right, if we are silly and we put 3 because we think we'll just write out the number instead of putting it in, it's going to tell us, please enter a numerical value for the first number. So let's get this right and put in the number 3. And then if we go to add numbers, it tells us, please enter a numerical value for the second number. So it knows this second box is the blank one, and it can tell us that, so we know exactly what to do. So if we put in, let's say 2, 3 plus 2 should give us 5, okay? So this is using validation, and that's the preferred way of doing things. And there's going to be a lot more on validation in later lessons where we go into more detail. One thing, for example, we'll just show you quickly now is that if that second box is empty, it says, please enter a numerical value for the second number. The cursor isn't anywhere in the box. You can make the cursor with this focus command come back and be in that actual box where they need to do the fixing. So that's something, a finer point we're going to do later on. But look, that's enough for this lesson. So thanks for watching, and try out all the things in here. Get the code from the link in the video description. Make that form in Visual Basic. You might not have a lot of time to do this, so that's why we've actually given you the code so you can copy and paste it in and play around with it rather than just spending so much time just doing typing. That should save you a lot of time, and this is an important program to learn. It seemed really simple, like we're just going to put 2 numbers in and add them up. Like, how easy is that? I mean, kids in grade 1 can do it, but it just shows you how detailed it is to program a computer to do it. And subscribe to our channel because we're releasing videos every week, and we're going to be doing this programming training course, especially if you're doing VC software development in Melbourne, Australia. You'll find this very useful. Okay, thanks.